Holy shit.
Welcome back to another animation breakdown. I am so happy after 2 weeks of very rough and poor episodes. 125 brings us back into the realms of quality, and I think does a wonderful job of demonstrating that complex animation is not the only way to make an episode feel impactful or memorable. This is a real triumph, and I think unless next week is somehow phenomenal, this will remain the best episode of January by a pretty large margin. This episode comes to us primarily from Yoshitaka Ashima. I've spoken about him at length before, but just to recap, he's a veteran of Toei animation. He's at least 64 years old and is one of the fastest and hardest working animators in the company, specializing in solo animation. That is to say, he often animates episodes entirely by himself. On Super, that's mostly remained true, but second key animators or chief supervisors have typically stepped in to polish up his art, since it's a little questionable to say the least. It's kind of funny and a little bit sad. His entry on the Japanese animation wiki says he's often the subject of ridicule from fans saying you can always tell it's him ahead of time because of Yashima face, and I think I know what they mean. At least on Super you can always recognize him from his pointy-nosed profile shots and slightly odd-looking features from the front. But in spite of that, he's a very capable animator, and I think this episode really shows him at his best. Although his contributions this week aren't exactly filled with the type of complex and dynamic movement that other animators produced, and we'll touch on them later, his work here was remarkably polished and free of the typically stiff or awkward movement you quite often find in his episodes. In the first half alone, the sequences between 17 and Toppo are really well executed. For example, when 17 spins on his heels and slides away firing blasts, there's finesse to the movement, and the poses are elegant enough to elevate the scene in spite of how short it is. In the second half, when he's dodging between rocks, Ashima makes use of smears and actually draws legitimately animated zooms, which is a nice breath of fresh air in amongst the huge amount of CG in these scenes. There's also actual debris that serves as a form of background animation while he's being chased. These are all tiny details, and none of them actively stand out on their own, but they form one whole picture that's very effective, very polished, and probably Yashima's most impressive work on the series so far. Heck, this is probably his last episode on the series, at least as far as being a supervisor goes, so it's nice that he went out with a real bang. Of course, because Yashima's not a specialized action animator, it's been pretty common in Super to give him one to ensure there's at least one or two standout moments in amongst the limited output a solo episode often necessitates. I think episode 84 in this arc was probably the biggest example of this, with Futoshi Higashide animating Goku versus Krillin. It was a terrific sequence that ensured this episode's most critical moment was done justice. The same type of structure is in place here too. At the start of the episode, Atsushi Nikaido animates Goku and Vegeta versus Jiren. It begins with a series of looped punches from various angles. They're very nicely done, definitely more in line with the type of dynamic Takahashi flurries we saw back in 122, focused on great poses, which are the most critical aspect of this type of animation. I'm sure you'll remember me criticizing the first half of 122 for very awkwardly posed loop flurries where basically nothing but the arms moved. This is, thankfully, limited animation done right. It leads right into a more complex sequence where Goku restrains Jiren for Vegeta's final flash, which displays Nikaido's lovely meaty effects work. It's a bit more of a traditional beam than, say, Chu's take on things, but it's a valid one and works nicely. I personally prefer a more modern take on Dragon Ball beams, but I fully appreciate the traditional approach is more in line with some fans' tastes. This is the best of both worlds to a degree, a big solid beam and then some more interesting shapes around it. Jiren then launches Goku through the arena, ending up with a nice plume of Nikaido smoke to wrap things up. It's a small and limited scene compared to Nikaido's best work, but that's a very good thing and bodes well for the future. You don't want him wasting too much time when it could be better spent on a bigger episode. I think I spotted him in the next episode preview, so perhaps we'll see some more complex scenes from him there. Next up, we have Shuichi Manabe, who was also bizarrely on last week's episode 2 as an assistant supervisor. His last real episode was 116, and since then he started popping up all over, so I don't really know what to expect if and when his next episode rolls around. It's obviously great that he's here elevating weaker episodes with his input, but like I said last week, I really hope it doesn't significantly affect his ability to produce his own terrific episode down the line. In this episode, he handles the major moment between Frieza and Toppo, and what a moment it is. From the very second his scene begins, before anything even begins to move, you can just see the quality ramp up as Manabe's style comes onto the screen. I struggle to think of how best to really describe his style. It's not really rough, but there's this grit and intensity to his drawings that makes him instantly recognizable. The huge gaping mouths are a trademark of his, and they lead right into this lovely bulging eye before Frieza throws his energy ball. This feeds right into an absolutely perfect rotation of Toppo. It is not easy to pull off this type of thing, and the jump that follows displays everything I just mentioned. It's exaggerated, it's gritty, it's intense, and it sells just how intimidating this new version of the character is supposed to be. In a lovely reference to the Frieza arc, you get one hell of a smear as he lands a punch on Frieza, and of course, again, the trademark gaping mouths makes its return. It's just so expressive. I love it so much, and it reaches its absolute peak during the section where Toppo squeezes Frieza's head. I honestly think the drawing speaks for itself. I don't think any other animator on the show could have been more perfectly suited for this scene. He did a wonderful job. Lastly, Miyuki Yokoyama is here, and like always with her super work, she mostly exists for the sake of character art. Along with Takeo Ide's corrections, they both help to ensure this episode looks as polished as it can possibly be, and I think they did their jobs nicely. However, going back to what I said at the start of this video, this episode's animation is not the star in any form. Its success and memorability is entirely down to Kazuya Kurosawa, the director and storyboard artist for this episode. A storyboard, of course, determines the choreography and cinematography of an episode, and it's absolutely outstanding here. You've got a stack of great close-up compositions that fans always love for wallpapers and talking about iconic moments, but for me, I'm just blown away by how creative some of the choices are here. There's a great focus on first-person perspectives throughout, and I think the most effective use is when Frieza drops to the floor after being beaten by Toppo. In conjunction with the directorial choice to blur the screen, it perfectly sells how brutal that attack was. Of course, as per usual, one thing I love to look at is the scale of the battle. Do these fights feel like they're between absolute titans? And I think the answer is absolutely yes here. The beam struggle is framed wonderfully, Frieza's shown off in all kinds of intimidating angles, and most critically, the destruction of the arena and the way Kurosawa makes full use of all the freedoms offered by that is extraordinary. He really sold the damage done by this fight, and I think that's the main reason why this episode feels so large. Every impact, every bit of damage is a key visual. Directors are also in charge of how lighting works, and that's why when an episode is lacking essential atmosphere, the blame always falls in the director's lap. Thankfully, Kurosawa's great, and whether it be the golden light as the arena explodes, the reds during the beam struggle, or the lovely contrast between all of these colours and the new purple in the background, he's managed to nail the dramatic atmosphere this episode so desperately needed. Again, music placement is also primarily a director's decision, and it's all perfectly placed. Every single component of this episode comes together to help elevate the pretty limited visuals into one of the most exciting episodes of the tournament so far. I'm often asked whether animation quality is the only aspect of an episode that determines my enjoyment, and I'll say it time and time again, it's really not. There's a baseline standard to animation that I appreciate and expect, but great animation and a good script are just as, if not more important to ensuring everything comes together successfully. This one really did, and like I said, after several weeks of middling to very poor episodes, it's nice to see a great one like this come about. I really hope next week surprises me too. But that is all from me for now. Let me know in the comment section below how you felt about this episode on the whole. I've seen a lot of positivity for this one across the internet, so I'll be interested to see if my community feels similarly. I've got an exciting announcement to talk about in the next few days. Some of you may have seen it already, but if not, definitely keep an eye out. Be sure to rate this video if you found it interesting, subscribe for all things animation, and I will see you next time.